talking about depression and Vedic astrology. Why do you get depressed? What are the astrological factors that show depression? I'll talk about the planets, and I'll talk about how to get undepressed if you're feeling down. So what leads to depression, and how can we see this astrologically? You know, depression is a very serious thing. You know, the first planetary indicator of depression, there are two. They have to do with the moon and Saturn. That's why moon and Saturn conjunctions or associations can lead to depression. But they also lead to something that's much deeper, which I will also talk about. I think it's important to first talk about why we get depressed. What is depression? And, you know, it's one of the tamasic qualities of life. There are three really tamasic energies that are shown by the tamasic planets: Mars, Saturn, and then the lunar nodes. So Mars brings about the tamasic quality of anger. Now again, anger in itself is tamasic because it can lead to things like violence. And I'm talking about anger that overcomes you to the point where you can't think straight. Now, things like frustration, which is an emotional state, again, that's more rajasic because it's in the emotions. Frustration often can be channeled toward a healthy outcome because we get angry, which is the Mars energy, when we see something that we need to change, that we think is wrong. Everyone gets angry. Everyone has anger and the potential for anger when they see something that they think is wrong, and they get this frustration, this emotional frustration, and then they don't know what to do about it. Then they can get angry, and it kind of boils over, and then that anger can actually turn to violence and some other kind of thing. But what it can also lead to is if we feel this frustration because we're angry about something that we want to change in the world, but then we're powerless to do anything about it. So anger and frustration plus powerlessness can lead to depression. So let me give you an example. And it's not going to be a good example because it's going to show how we can misuse our anger and how it can lead to depression. But let's say there's something that's frustrating you. Let's say that's frustrating someone around the home. Let's say, for example, you're not very good with your anger. And you go to work and you get angry at work because you're not treated well. And you want to be able to change that. Let's say you're like a mid-level manager. You have a boss above you and you have workers below you. Okay? Your bosses above you are making you angry because they're not appreciating you enough. They're not giving you as much money. They're yelling at you. They're blaming you for things that aren't your fault. So you're angry and you're frustrated with them, right? If you're not very good with your anger, you might take it out on the people below you, the people that you have power over, your employees. So you might vent your anger onto them. Or you might, because you have power over them, you can vent your anger somewhere. Again, it's better not to vent your anger on your workers. It's better to find a creative outlet for your anger, right? To make yourself stronger. But what the best thing to do is to find a way to channel that frustration into changing the situation that's actually making you angry, which is something bigger than you. Which is like, let's say, your bosses who are not treating you well. Everything that makes us angry is because there's something, at least initially, that is happening, and it's bigger than us. There's some kind of powerlessness going on at first, and we want to get power over it, and we want to change it. We want to change something we see as wrong, and so this frustration, this anger builds up, and then we try to do something to change it. Even if we don't change it totally, we find some way to make some progress in it. Let's say something even big, like political or some other kind of thing. This is how people use their anger creatively. Like an entrepreneur uses their anger creatively. They see something about the world that's not right, and they want to do something about it, and so they get all excited and enthusiastic to change this thing. That's what Mars is. This is how Mars can be very creative. And if someone's Mars is weak, they're not going to know how to channel their frustration into something creative. Instead, they feel powerless. So in the situation that I talked about, what would be better is, rather than get depressed about your bosses oppressing you because you have no power over that. So what can typically happen is we're depressed about the way we're being treated, so we take it out on others, we vent our frustration, we go home and, kick the dog and mistreat our children and our wife or other things because of all these things we're frustrated about at work or about the world that we can't change. So over time, that can lead to depression. Too much of this builds up over too many areas of life, and we might get depressed about everything, and then we get this chronic depression. So again, that Saturn energy is kind of the awareness of that thing that's much bigger than us. It's bigger than who we are. And it's also a quality of fear. We're afraid that if we take on the boss, we might lose our job, lose our money, get punished. So again, Saturn, this is how Saturn is kind of the greater malefic. Mars is the lesser malefic, the lesser tamasic planet, because it's like our anger in the moment. It doesn't hurt things as much. It can hurt things more. But Saturn is like the greater malefic because it's like literally the fear of death or the fear of big consequences, being punished, being trapped, right? Being trapped in a situation. This is why situations where we feel trapped, again, which is a Saturn thing, can lead to depression. Again, if it's just a moment, it's not so bad, right? Like, let's say our boss, once in a while, they're just an idiot. Our boss sometimes is just a jerk. We can deal with that. That's not going to make us depressed, especially if it's once in a while, or I just got to deal with this person once in a while. It's irritating, but it's not going to be depressed. If we're trapped in a situation where we have to keep dealing with that, that's what can lead to the depression part of it, right? So the trapped part, the structure, the situation, these are Saturn things, right? Saturn lords over time and big things. Again, to operate creatively in time, this is the reason why Mars is exalted in Saturn's sign. Because taking that Mars frustration and being strategic and finding a plan and having the courage first in the moment to do something, but then doing it for a long period of time. It's called being disciplined. That's what discipline, or, Mars is the discipline in the moment to do what we know is right. Saturn is the commitment to do it over and over again. That's called spiritual practice. Spiritual practices aren't done once. Everybody can do it once. That's no big deal. Spiritual practice, or what's called sadhana, is done all the time, over and over again. So what leads to depression is some kind of frustration within a situation where you felt powerless to change it and or trapped. Again, that's a form of feeling powerless. And it builds up over time, which is Saturn. Now, again, of course, we experience and feel it in the moon, because the moon is the amalgam and the storehouse and the container of all of our feelings. So what we need to be doing is clearing out our mental, emotional space. And, sometimes you'll see if someone has a Mars-Moon conjunction, a Saturn-Moon conjunction, there can be the possibility of anger, frustration that can lead to depression. The other tamasic planet I mentioned was the nodal axis, either Rahu or Ketu. And they lead to confusion. They can lead to depression because we're confused. We don't know why things are happening or what's the meaning of this. Why is this happening? And the nodes create a sort of confusion where we're not even aware that we're causing the problem or that there's a way out of it, and we've bought into some kind of smoky version of reality, which also can lead to being depressed angry, frustrated, and confused. So the real creative thing to do with depression is to first find out what you're angry about. If you're depressed, it's because you're angry about something. Let's use one, for example, like, you're depressed because you're out of shape. Let's say you are trying to lose some weight, and it leads to depression, and then it kind of spirals. Then you're depressed because you can't lose the weight. So you keep doing the behavior that feeds the depression. This is kind of, it can circle on itself, right? Which means then maybe you eat more, and then you exercise less, and it can be a cycle. So for example, instead of saying, oh, I'm so depressed, and then playing into the victimization and the guilt and the fear, this is how you know it's depression, because it's moved from the Mars frustration to the Saturn structure. You've created now a cycle. It's now a thing. It's now, again, you feel like a victim when you're telling yourself the story of why you're depressed. Depression then has this whole story with it. Well, this at work, what am I supposed to do because I'm not appreciated, and I'm feeling depressed. There's a whole kind of structure now there for the depression that revolves around feeling like a victim. You've been victimized. You have that whole kind of, feeling persecuted and mistreated, cycle of abuse from the past, and it turns into this whole kind of thing. First, again, you need to be present. You need to find out what you're really angry about. Literally. And again, the more you can trace it back, the better. We're usually only angry about a few things, that we're obviously being mistreated in one way or another. But again, you can find out, let's say that it's the thing about the weight, right? You can, instead of being depressed about it, you can find that you're angry because you lack the discipline to exercise a little bit more and to do this. Or what you need to do then, again, is just make small steps. It's actually a Mars problem. Get out of the feeling that you're being victimized or you're being persecuted. There was something from the past that you're angry about that you weren't able to change. So the first thing to do is to start make yourself feeling personally stronger. Personal strength, which again, it's a Mars cure. Do some things to feel physically stronger. Again, make sure to go out and take some walks. You don't have to go, start lifting weights or working out or something. Start moving more, move your body more. Especially something that you might enjoy, like, dance or run around or, some kind of activity, sports, or get out in nature or something like that. And of course, one of the best ones is like yoga. Yoga is fantastic for strengthening the body and the mind. And get more disciplined. Not about the thing. Don't worry about facing the thing. Don't worry about taking on the boss and changing that. Because the other thing about it, it's not just that you were angry and you were powerless to change it, but you were also lacking the intelligence or the compassion to just accept it as well. Some things you just have to accept. So it's not just that you're too powerless to change it through Mars, but you are also, one or the other or both, lacking the ability to just accept it for the way it is. At least right now. Right now, this is the way it is, and I can't change this now. It's the way it is, I can't change it now. So I have to accept this, and then I have a plan on how I can get out of this, because this is showing me something that I need to change. Like, let's say about the boss example. Because if you're powerless to change it, it doesn't mean, okay, now I'm powerless. No, then you have to accept it for now and say, but this work is obviously not my whole life. My whole life doesn't revolve around how these people treat me and how this situation is. I'm not really trapped. I'm not really a victim. I'm not really oppressed. All of that is me cycling things from my childhood and all of that, which is meaningless. So I just have to accept this situation is just what it is. Having the compassion for those people who are oppressing you, it's also a big part, and that's a big part of Saturn. Forgiveness is a big part of not feeling persecuted. You know, we feel persecuted, again, and we feel like a victim because we're angry. Even all that victimization. If you feel like a victim of the people that are persecuting you and making you feel powerless, you're still dealing with a lot of anger. It's your anger that is actually feeling victimized and persecuted. And I bet if that's going on, again, I'm just like to keep it real, but I bet if that's going on and you're feeling like a victim and feeling persecuted with that frustration, I bet you're kind of victimizing other people a little bit. Take a look at this and notice if the people in your life that you have power over, you're not kind of oppressing them a little bit. If you haven't forgiven your persecutors, and we've all been persecuted, we've all been treated unfairly, and if you haven't forgiven them, you're perpetrating some of it. And again, that's an uncomfortable truth. People don't like when I say this to them in reading, so if I say it just in general to the world, it's a softer blow. But if you're still angry at the people that mistreated you, especially from your childhood or this or that or your bosses, and you're still so attached and fired up and defining yourself by all the persecutions in your life, I guarantee you are perpetrating some of it to those people that you do have power over. Stereotypically, like the one I used in the beginning, the boss who's oppressing you, you're probably oppressing your people relative to almost exactly the same degree. Your ability to kind of flow with that and be like, they're jerks, whatever. You're probably able to flow and pass it forward that way as well. So lacking the power to change what makes you angry, or lacking the intelligence or compassion to forgive or to not be so attached to what you think is oppressing you, or what is frustrating you, because again, it's something that's frustrating you. Again, let's say that it's not a boss kind of thing. Let's say it's something social or something political or some other thing. Again, accepting that right now that's the way it is, but I can make steps toward that. Especially if I make myself stronger, then I'm just going to increase my own level of courage, my own ability to show up, and I'm not going to be defined by this victimization story and this powerlessness story. Then the depression should start to shift. You won't feel as depressed. So again, it's really a Mars issue, which is that discipline in the moment and feeling personally powerful. So again, this is why we do things like yoga and meditation and moving the body and getting energy moving through the body and mind, what's called prana. So what do you think? Does that make sense? Let me know what you think, and leave a comment or share and subscribe to the channel as well.